Welcome to a jaw-dropping royal story that's shaking the world. In a moment, no one saw coming. Queen Camilla broke down in tears as King Charles III made a historic decision, handing the throne to Prince William. What broke the Queen's heart? Could this be the turning point that changes the British monarchy forever? Join us as we uncover the secrets behind this shocking event and reveal the untold drama that's been kept hidden for far too long. The truth may be more powerful than anyone expected. Hey everyone, what do you think about this royal drama? Has anyone in your family or friend group ever predicted that Prince William would take the throne this soon? If yes, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, leave a 0. Be sure to watch the full video for all the juicy details, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to support the channel. Your opinion matters. Let's dive in and see what really happened. The throne room shimmered with the ceremonial glow of royal tradition, yet beneath all the grandeur, something far more fragile was unfolding. King Charles stood tall, but the weariness on his face was unmistakable. At his side was his beloved wife Camilla, and his eldest son Prince William, standing poised beside him. Sunlight streamed through the cathedral windows, casting a warm glow over the golden regalia. But every gaze was fixed on the man slowly approaching the throne. In that moment, history and emotion collided. This wasn't a typical ceremonial event. It wasn't a tradition carefully planned on a royal calendar. It marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Charles paused just before the throne, his shoulders heavy with the weight of history. William stood nearby upright and composed, fully aware that this historic moment was focused on him and on Camilla. Every breath in the room felt suspended as the future of the monarchy hung in the balance. Even the most seasoned royal followers couldn't help but be moved by the moment King Charles officially placed the crown on Prince William's head. In the grand throne room where royal traditions have endured for centuries, the emotions of a mother, a wife, and a queen blended into one powerful scene. As Charles gently set the crown upon his son's head, cameras caught Camilla's tears streaming silently down her cheek. It was a moment filled with pride, pain, and the weight of everything that had led to this day. This wasn't a scripted ritual with rehearsals and perfect lines. It was a transfer of power, but also a mother's pride, a wife's farewell, and the quiet departure of a queen. William knelt to receive the crown, Charles embraced his son, and Camilla stood by in silence, overcome with emotion. This is not the monarchy we once imagined. This is the humanity we rarely see breaking through centuries of tradition. Camilla stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the two most important men in her life. Her face, usually composed and unreadable, began to shift. The tremor of emotion was impossible to miss. Her eyes softened, her lips pressed tightly together, and yet something unmistakable lingered deep within her expression. No words were spoken, but the farewell was clear. This wasn't just a formal ceremony, it was a queen's silent goodbye. The air was thick with emotion, as if the room itself was holding its breath. William looked at his father not just as a king, but as the man who had raised and guided him. That moment was both dramatic and profoundly real. The centuries-old royal rituals suddenly touched emotions so raw that it felt as though time had stopped. No one in the room dared to move. Everything paused in a sacred instant. It was a rare fusion of history, legacy, and heartfelt connection. But today the decision had been made. Charles didn't speak of his frail health, but rather of time gradually slowing. The exhaustion, the weight of the crown, and a changing world all called for a new face, a younger voice. This wasn't a retreat born of weakness. It was a deliberate, thoughtful transfer of power. Camilla turned to look at Charles, her eyes not filled with fear, but with a quiet, unspoken pain. In that glance, decades of love, sacrifice, and duty were silently acknowledged. She had stood by Charles through every storm, from scandals to the pressures of royalty, and now she would continue to stand beside him as he stepped back, making room for the next generation. "I will always support you," Camilla said softly, "all the way." They looked at each other no longer as monarchs, no longer defined by their titles, but simply as two people who had spent their lives under the public eye. Now they were preparing to step quietly out of the spotlight. In that stillness, there was both relief and sorrow. This was a historic moment, the final act of a king, the first step of a son, and the quiet unraveling of a queen. And it all happened live. The final decision of King Charles. That very morning, before the crown sparkled beneath the lights of the throne room, King Charles sat alone in his private office, lost in silent reflection. He knew that what he was about to do would change the course of the monarchy forever. The room was cloaked in darkness, heavy with the weight of an ending moment. In front of Charles, Camilla stood still, composed, yet clearly unsettled, as if sensing that something irreversible was about to happen. "It's time," Charles finally said, his voice low and steady. "William, now it's your time." Camilla didn't speak. She folded her hands in her lap, her gaze distant, fixed on the window. She had heard these thoughts before, fleeting whispers in quiet moments past. But this time they weren't just thoughts. They were a final decision. This moment held everything: sacrifice, love, and the understanding that legacy isn't just about preserving the past, but sometimes knowing when to let go. In the hours that followed, as Camilla stood in the grand throne room, she reflected on it all. Every step taken, every decision made, and now the final step into history. It was the closing of one chapter and the quiet beginning of another, written not in ceremony, but in grace. When William put on his uniform that morning, he wasn't just dressing in ceremonial attire, he was stepping into destiny. Each button he fastened, each piece of metal he attached, felt heavier than ever before. Over the years, he had been trained and prepared for this moment. But nothing could have truly prepared him for the feeling of the crown being placed upon his head. Standing at the edge of the throne room, William took a deep breath. He glanced at Camilla, who looked at him with a tenderness he had never expected. In that brief exchange, a silent understanding passed between them. When that historic moment arrived, William couldn't help but think of the emotion in Camilla's eyes and the deep pride reflected in Charles's trembling hands. He knew that the true power of this moment wasn't in the words spoken, it was in the look exchanged between generations. As Charles turned to him and gave a gentle nod, William bowed not just to his king, but to the father who had prepared him for this moment. It was a gesture filled with respect, love, and the silent passing of a legacy. The son of a king, the heir, and now the future of the crown. Camilla's tears began to fall. As the crown left Charles's hands, a subtle yet profound change appeared in Queen Camilla's expression. A single tear slowly traced her cheek, catching the light from the grand chandeliers. It wasn't part of the ceremony, not something rehearsed or expected. but it was real, so real that no one in the room could look away. In that tear was a lifetime of emotion quietly spilling into history. There was no rivalry, no tension, only gratitude and a quiet acknowledgement. Thank you for everything, he told himself. Then his gaze shifted to Charles, his father, his king, who would soon no longer carry either title. Their relationship had been tested and rebuilt over time, shaped by hardship and healing. But this moment wasn't about dwelling on the past. It was about stepping forward into the future. And for the first time, that future felt entirely his own. William stepped forward each stride, steady his back straight, his face composed, though his hands remained firm with quiet tension. The weight of royal tradition pressed on him, but so did the weight of the future. This wasn't just about preserving the monarchy, it was about evolving it. William had prepared a speech, one carefully edited, rehearsed, and refined. But when the moment arrived, he knew that only sincerity could truly capture what needed to be said. The crown was heavy, but his voice had to be light with truth. As Charles gently placed the crown in William's hands, Camilla's lips parted, and she took a deep breath, struggling to hold back the emotions rising in her chest. A quiet sniffle, barely audible, echoed through the throne room. She raised a hand to her chest, an instinctive gesture as she stood motionless, though the emotions inside her surged. The camera zoomed in, capturing the moment without missing a beat. It was a split second of vulnerability that spoke louder than any words ever could. And that was the image of a queen undone, not by sorrow, not by regret, but by a powerful wave of love, pride, and immense sacrifice. She had stood by Charles not only through the years of monarchy, but through decades of misunderstanding, criticism, and reinvention. And now she watched him let go, and with that release, her role quietly came to an end as well. It was the closing act of a woman who had given everything and asked for nothing in return. Every step they had taken, every formal dinner, every overseas trip, every difficult decision had led to this moment. Now Camilla stood still and quiet, filled with both tears and pride. It wasn't just the crown being passed on. It was an entire lifetime woven into the fabric of the monarchy. This ceremony wasn't just a coronation. It was a symbol of sacrifice, contribution, and unforgettable moments. And in that moment, all the years of duty and devotion came full circle. The end of an era unfolded before their eyes. Then a sudden moment, not part of the official script. Camilla quietly raised her hand, gently wiped away her tears, and straightened her back. A final deep breath. She glanced at Charles and William one last time, as the crown changed hands and the Queen bowed for the final time before the public. It was a graceful farewell filled with dignity, signaling the close of a chapter she had carried with strength and heart. Silent and solemn, that moment was unforgettable. The final words of the ceremony echoed through the grand hall, and immediately a quiet wave spread across the room. No one dared to speak. The weight of what had just happened was too immense. Centuries of tradition passed down from father to son settled like dust beneath the sunlight. It was a moment suspended in time where history, legacy, and emotion quietly became one. King Charles stood tall, the crown in his hands, and spoke with steady calm. "Now I hereby appoint my son William as the next king of this great kingdom." William stepped forward, kneeling on one knee, his heart full of purpose and devotion. "I swear to protect and serve in duty and in heart." The throne room fell silent, No music, no whispers, only history echoing through the polished stones. It was a moment that would be etched into the legacy of the crown forever. Camilla stood beside him, her posture strong, though her cheek was still damp from the tears she had shed earlier. Her eyes never left William, not out of sorrow, but out of boundless respect. The courtiers watched as well, some with tears quietly forming in their eyes. No speeches were made, only solemn nods, a deep reverence for this historic moment. In that silence, a powerful unity was felt by all who bore witness. But then, in a moment of pure humanity that left everyone astonished, Charles stepped toward William and embraced him. It wasn't a royal handshake or a scripted nod, it was a hug tight and sincere. A father pulling his son close, not just to pass on the crown, but to share love, trust, and the heavy burden that now rested on William's shoulders. Camilla stood watching, her eyes still shining, though the expression on her face remained unreadable. It was an unforgettable moment, one that transcended tradition and touched the hearts of all who witnessed it. Then she moved, not hurriedly, but with each step full of grace. Her walk through the silent throne room carried weight, each movement steeped in unspoken meaning. This was her final entrance into the room, not as a queen, but as a wife. A maternal figure and a witness to one of the most emotional days in royal history. With every step, she seemed to leave behind a legacy of quiet strength and unwavering presence. Can you feel the weight of this moment? As the crown changes hands, it's not just a throne, it's a legacy and raw emotion laid bare. What are your thoughts on the modern monarchy that Charles, Camilla, and William are shaping? Drop your opinions in the comments below right now, and if this story is gripping you like it is us, hit that like button and share this video to keep this historic moment alive. Make sure you stay tuned, because what happens next could change everything. Not with gold or jewels, but with emotion. The public's reaction was swift. News editors scrambled to revise their scripts. Reporters at the palace discarded their pre-written headlines. The story had shifted. It was no longer just about the transfer of power. It was about the power of emotion. And within minutes, the internet erupted. Screens lit up with hashtags, tributes, and heartfelt reactions from around the world. William turned back, approached her, and in a moment that melted even the hardest hearts, he knelt and embraced Camilla. He didn't bow his head, he wrapped her in both arms. The gesture shattered years of tension, declaring to the world, this is family, not merely monarchy. Gasps echoed from the court's gallery. Royal watchers knew this was no rehearsal. This was genuine connection. This was grace. This was unity in motion. And in that silent embrace, a new chapter quietly began. Outside the palace, videos of the moment spread rapidly. People didn't just witness a crown being passed, they saw hearts reaching out. The moment was raw, authentic, and perhaps a glimpse of the modern monarchy we might come to expect. In a single instant, Charles, Camilla, and William formed a silent, emotional triangle. The future was set. And across the world, viewers felt they were witnessing not just history, but transformation. Videos of Camilla's tears, her unexpected embrace with William, and Charles's gentle voice declaring his son as successor quickly dominated every platform. Camilla crown soared as a global trend. But this time, it wasn't driven by controversy or conflict. It was compassion. Outside Buckingham Palace's gates, jubilant crowds cheered. Strangers embraced, sharing a priceless moment. For once, the monarchy had united people not through tradition alone, but through genuine human emotion. An elderly woman clutched her chest and said, "I never thought I'd see this day. What a beautiful moment." Tourists wiped their eyes, unsure why. The scene touched everyone, and though pundits debated its implications, even the harshest critics fell silent. A prominent columnist tweeted, "I've never supported the monarchy, but this moment, that was real." For a brief moment, history and humanity stood side by side, leaving no room for cynicism. As the cameras stopped rolling and the palace doors closed, Camilla sat alone in a room far from the glow of ceremonial crowds. The soft light from the fireplace danced across her face, the room quiet, just as she liked it, just as she needed. She hadn't meant to cry. She thought she'd be composed, regal, detached. But when Charles passed the crown and she met William's eyes, the tears came not from sadness or fear, but from everything they'd fought for to reach this moment. It was a release years in the making, the kind of emotion that only comes after a lifetime lived under scrutiny. A senior aide later recounted that she whispered to Charles that evening, "It was my greatest honor." It wasn't a line for the cameras, but a truth from her heart. She had stood by Charles through every storm. When public opinion shifted, when tabloids painted her as the villain, when scandals shook the monarchy, she stayed not because she had to, but because she chose to, for love, for loyalty, and for him. That quiet declaration carried the weight of decades spent in the shadows, finally brought into the light. Morning shows endlessly replayed the ceremony. Analysts praised Camilla's strength, Charles's humility, and William's composure. Even those who once called for abolishing the monarchy admitted this display of vulnerability might have earned the crown rare public affection. Though a few critics persisted, questioning the timing symbolism or lack of parliamentary debate, their voices were drowned out not by silence, but by sincerity. The emotional authenticity of the moment spoke louder than any policy or protocol could. This time, the royals didn't lean on history or ceremony. They leaned on their humanity, and the public responded. In a world weary of performances, authenticity remains the hardest yet most cherished thing. For once, it wasn't tradition that won hearts, it was truth. Now, after years of being called controversial, divisive, and unnecessary, she departed with grace, dignity, and a tear that said more than words ever could. That night, royal staff saw her hand William a small locket, a family heirloom she'd kept hidden for years. She gently pressed it into his palm and whispered, "For guidance whenever you need it." In that quiet exchange, a lifetime of misunderstanding seemed to soften, if only for a moment. He nodded. No words were needed. The moment transcended a mere transfer of the crown. As Camilla gazed out the palace window one last time that evening, her reflection was barely visible in the glass. She smiled, not the forced smile of a queen, but the gentle smile of a woman who had given her all and finally found peace. It was the kind of peace that only comes after weathering years of storms in silence. The message was unmistakable. This was not just a coronation. It was a continuation, built on respect, not merely legacy. William spoke of duty, youth, unity, but above all, family, not as an ideal, but as something living, complex, evolving. He described Charles's reign as a bridge of transition and vowed his own would build upon it with the support of all those by his side. His words reflected not just a promise to the nation, but a personal commitment shaped by everything he had lived through. William concluded his speech not with royal decree, but with warmth. "To my father, my mother, and my people, I am here to serve humbly, fully, and together." Applause erupted instantly, but more powerful were the silent tears of those watching from homes, offices, and phones. It wasn't just a speech, it was a declaration of leadership from the heart. Formal roles had been reshaped. In that moment, the crown felt less like a symbol of power and more like a promise of connection. The new king stood before the nation not as a prince, not as a son, but as King William. The scene was familiar: golden curtains, marble columns, and a silent room. But the voice that filled the space was fresh, resolute, clear, and human. He didn't begin with policy or tradition, but with a name. And with that name, he reminded everyone of the legacy that shaped him and the future he hoped to create. First, I wish to thank Queen Camilla. The room held its breath. William looked directly into the camera, restraining emotion but radiating sincerity. Her unwavering support, her love for my father, and her quiet strength have upheld this family. And now, as we turn to a new chapter, her wisdom and grace will remain part of my guidance. His words carried not just appreciation, but a bridge between generations, a recognition of all she had endured and given. With William's ascension and Charles now stepping back, the palace released an official statement. Queen Camilla would now hold the title of Queen Consort Emerita. It was a profound honor, rich with meaning. A recognition of her role, her years of service, and the quiet sacrifices she had made. She would no longer attend weekly engagements or international tours, but she would continue her work behind the scenes through the charities closest to her heart: literacy programs, animal welfare, and support for abuse survivors. These were causes she had championed not for attention, but as a path toward healing. William asked her to continue her mission, though, in a new and more personal way. He wanted her influence to be lasting, not echoed in applause, but felt in lives changed. Charles stepped back with quiet dignity. No scandals, no public outcry, just a father gracefully retiring, ready to let the next generation take the lead. A statement from the palace confirmed that he would remain available to offer guidance when needed, but he would no longer take the reins. It was a peaceful transition, one that reflected wisdom more than retreat. Royal biographers called it the final chapter in her journey of redemption, a moment when the nation and the world recognized that the woman once labeled a homewrecker had in fact shaped the monarchy with humility, dignity, and love. Commentators from all sides, both supporters and skeptics, could no longer deny what had just unfolded. It was a turning point that reframed her legacy. We didn't expect emotion. We didn't expect humanity. But it came, and it made the crown feel real again, a broadcaster said during a panel recap. Social media, usually a battleground of opposing views, was flooded with messages of support and admiration. Artists began sketching portraits capturing Camilla's emotional moment, while fan-made videos blended images from her younger days with scenes from the ceremony set to soft, moving music. The tributes came pouring in. People didn't just admire her, they finally began to understand her. Yet dissenting voices still lingered, questioning whether a moment of vulnerability could genuinely soften an institution they viewed as outdated. But even among the harshest critics, there was a noticeable pause. Camilla's emotional moment didn't necessarily change their opinions, but it undeniably softened their tone. And so, for the first time in recent memory, the monarchy transitioned not with scandal, but with dignity. The message from Buckingham Palace was unmistakable. While the crown may pass from one generation to the next, honor and compassion remain. The public and media reflected that sentiment. By the next morning, headlines around the world struck a rare chord of unity. From tabloids to major newspapers, from morning talk shows to late-night panels, the tone was unexpectedly consistent. Something remarkable had just taken place, not just a change in leadership, but a rare moment of genuine human connection within one of the world's most tradition-bound institutions. Camilla's tears, caught in a single unforgettable frame and replayed countless times, were hailed as one of the most powerful royal images of the century. Polls released that evening showed a surprising surge in support for the monarchy, especially among younger generations. The reason: authenticity. For the first time in years, the royal family didn't feel like a distant institution, but a family navigating life change and legacy together. Many compared the moment to Queen Victoria's public funeral or Queen Elizabeth II's rare personal reflections. But this moment, Camilla's tear, Charles's embrace, William's bow, was something else entirely. It wasn't just symbolic, it was emotional currency. And the monarchy, often guarded and scripted, finally earned something real. The message was clear: the crown endures, but it's the humanity behind it that keeps its heartbeat alive. They were told what had happened in words they could understand. Grandpa passed on the crown. Daddy's king now. Charlotte asked if that meant he had homework. Everyone laughed. That simple moment became part of the family's peace, a reminder of childhood innocence and lightheartedness. In a quiet, private moment captured in a clip, never meant for public release, but gently shared by a palace insider, Harry, had he been there, stood beside William and Camilla. He didn't speak much, but he reached out his hand to Camilla, who accepted it without hesitation. That simple, brief handshake carried more weight than any official statement ever could. It was a sign of a family trying to heal in its own way. Away from the crowds and media frenzy, the royal family gathered in a cozy dining room inside Buckingham Palace. While the throne room holds centuries of history, this warm, candlelit space filled with quiet conversation felt truly like family. Catherine gently guided Queen Camilla to her seat with a tender touch. No titles, no cameras, just two women who had traveled different roads, but now sat together at the same table. Catherine whispered something lightly, touching Camilla's hand, and they shared a warm, genuine smile. Earlier, George and Charlotte, dressed neatly yet comfortably, peeked shyly from behind velvet curtains and waved to the few onlookers. That evening, the family gathered for a private toast. Charles raised his glass, his hand slightly trembling, and said, "To love in all its forms and the courage it takes to pass it on." They drank together. Camilla smiled through misty eyes, and William looked at her with a quiet sense of peace. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't a fairy tale, but for a family often divided by protocol and pressure, it was something rare, a moment of unity across generations beyond wounds and change. Their faces were calm and resolute, carrying the quiet weight of the day. just a little older than that morning. But the image that stayed with everyone the longest was Camilla reaching out to clasp William's hand. Not for the cameras, not for show, just two souls silently acknowledging all that had passed between them, a crown, a title, and a shared burden of duty. As the screen faded to black, a voice softly closed the chapter. She stepped into history beside him, then retreated with grace, leaving behind not just a question of lineage, but a deeper question of legacy. Did this moment redefine what it truly means to be a queen? Was Camilla's quiet vulnerability more powerful than all the royal ceremonies combined? And in the end, isn't love soft, steadfast, and often silent stronger than legacy itself? In that dining room, they were no longer kings or heirs, just a family, beginning anew, closing a chapter filled with reflection and unspoken questions. The final scenes of this extraordinary day unfolded like a silent film. Buckingham's once bustling corridors dimmed to stillness. A royal car carried Charles and Camilla away from the palace, their hands quietly clasped in the back seat. Meanwhile, William stood by the gate with Catherine waving softly to the lingering crowd. We'd love to hear what you think. Share your thoughts in the comments below, subscribe for more royal insights, and don't forget to follow as history continues to unfold. As the crown passed hands, a single tear told the story. Camilla stepped back with grace, Charles left with dignity, and William moved forward with purpose. It wasn't just a ceremony, it was a farewell, a new beginning, and a bridge between eras. That moment changed everything.